Welcome back to our channel. That Washington quarter from 1968, 1978, or 1993 might be hiding more than you think. A rare 1968 quarter struck on a silver planchet has sold in top grades for over $5,000. A pristine error-free 1978 die variety fetched $11,500, and a high-grade 1993 silver proof sold for more than $10,300. Think your spare change is ordinary? Like and subscribe to reveal hidden quarter fortunes. In 1968, the United States Mint was adjusting to changes that still rippled through the nation's coinage. The mid-1960s had stripped silver from circulating quarters, leaving the familiar Washington design struck in a copper nickel clad that many collectors of the time dismissed as inferior. But the presses kept moving, producing millions of these new clad quarters at Philadelphia, Denver, and the recently opened San Francisco Mint, which had begun striking proof coins and a limited run of circulation strikes to meet demand. At San Francisco, the transition had been hectic. New dies were shipped hastily. Quality control was stretched thin, and errors, small and subtle, found their way into sealed bags before anyone noticed. One such mistake occurred on a die destined for the circulation strike 1968 quarters. Whether through a mix-up in the die room or an improperly prepared planchet, a flaw emerged on a handful of coins struck early that year. No one noticed as bags were loaded and shipped out of the facility into the waiting economy. The coins quietly circulated unnoticed, their secret hidden on the obverse, where the familiar phrase "I in God we trust" showed a faint doubling, and the mint mark itself seemed slightly misplaced. It was an anomaly that escaped even the keen eyes of the few who still cared to sort through change after silver's departure. For years, the error lay dormant. A decade and a half later, a collector named Carla was hunched over her kitchen table with a tray of coins spread out before her. She had taken up the hobby from her grandfather, but while others chased old silver and gold, Carla had developed an affection for the overlooked moderns. She believed there were still discoveries waiting in the newer dates if one simply looked close enough. That evening, she was combing through a roll of quarters bought at a coin show on a whim. Most were unremarkable 1970s and 1980s pieces with dull wear. But then she turned over a 1968 quarter and froze. Something about it seemed off. The mint mark on the obverse was shifted slightly to the left, more than she'd ever seen. She held it closer under the light and caught her breath. The words "I in God we trust" looked odd, the letters appearing faintly doubled in spots, as though an echo lingered beneath the surface. Her pulse quickened as she compared it to other 1968 quarters she had in her album. None of them looked quite like this one. With growing excitement, she posted detailed images of the coin to an online forum of error specialists asking for opinions. The responses trickled in at first, then came faster. Some dismissed it as machine doubling, but one respected member chimed in with confidence. This was hub doubling, not mechanical. And that mint mark? Definitely misplaced. He encouraged her to submit it for authentication. Within days, Carla had shipped the coin to a grading service and began a nervous wait. When the envelope returned, her hands trembled as she pulled the slab free and read the label. 1968 Washington quarter double die obverse with misplaced mint mark, $55. She stared at it for a long moment, then allowed herself a smile. She had uncovered something almost no one even knew existed. Word spread quickly through collector circles. Articles were written describing the newly attributed variety, its characteristics, and extreme rarity. Other examples trickled in from change jars and old rolls, but most were worn down from circulation. A few sharp pieces like Carla's remained the standard by which others were compared. Dealers began showcasing the variety in display cases at shows, always surrounded by curious eyes and quiet conversations. At first, the value was modest, with sales hovering in the hundreds of dollars, but as years passed and interest in modern errors grew, the price began to climb. At auctions, collectors bid against one another for a chance to own the elusive 1968 double die with its peculiar mint mark. Each sale set a new benchmark, hinting at how much demand outweighed supply. Dealers speculated about how many were still hiding in circulation, but few were ever found in decent condition again. Carla kept her coin for several years, watching its reputation grow. She declined offers more than once, waiting until the right time to part with it. When that time came, the auction house placed it prominently in their catalog with a full-page spread detailing its story. The bidding was intense, buyers driving the figure higher and higher with each call. When the gavel finally came down, Carla felt a quiet pride knowing she'd helped bring the variety into the light. Her coin realized between $55,500 and $132,500 depending on grade and bidder appetite, an extraordinary sum for a clad quarter most people still overlooked in their change. Carla tucked away the auction check and smiled, knowing some treasures don't have to shine in silver to change your life. By 1978, the Washington quarter had already become a familiar fixture in the pockets of Americans, a dependable workhorse of commerce bearing the same stately profile of George Washington since 1932. The country itself was restless, shifting from the turbulence of the 1970s into a period of uncertain optimism, and the mint was no exception. Copper-nickel-clad coinage still dominated production, yet the machinery that struck billions of quarters each year was aging and overworked. In Philadelphia and Denver, presses ran day and night, while San Francisco focused mainly on proof coins for collectors. In the frantic pace of minting, small oversights happened unnoticed in the noise of metal on dies. That year, one such oversight found its way into the Philadelphia Mint's output. A batch of working dies prepared in haste was sent to the presses with a subtle but crucial flaw. A hubbing error had left faint doubling on the date and parts of the motto Liberty. The die also carried a slightly misaligned impression that caused the left edge of the obverse design to appear shifted ever so slightly into the rim. These errors alone might have been minor, but combined they gave rise to something special. A quarter that somehow passed unnoticed into the wild and began its quiet journey through circulation. For nearly 2 decades, the mistake went undetected. Bags of quarters were shipped to banks, rolled and spent. Change rattled in cash registers and jars while the error waited patiently in plain sight. Its discovery would not come until a rainy spring morning, when a collector named Daniel sifted through boxes of circulated coins he'd picked up at an estate sale. Daniel had been collecting since childhood, but his tastes were unusual. While his friends hunted silver, he loved clad quarters. He thought of them as overlooked, a modern mystery still unfolding. That day, as he sat at his desk, a mug of coffee steaming beside him, he dumped out rolls of quarters and began to inspect each one. At first, there was nothing remarkable, mostly worn coins from the 80s and 90s. Then his fingers froze as he turned over a 1978 quarter and caught a strange shimmer on the obverse. He held it closer under a loupe and tilted it in the light. The date showed faint doubling and the letters of Liberty wavered, as though there was a ghost of each letter just beside the true one. He checked the rim, noticing that the lower left portion of Washington's profile almost kissed the edge more than it should. It was subtle but undeniable. His pulse quickened as he dug out a standard 1978 from another roll and placed them side by side. The difference was real. That night he posted clear close-up photographs on a coin forum asking for insight. Replies trickled in, at first cautious, some claiming machine doubling, others urging him to have it authenticated. Then a seasoned variety collector weighed in. He'd seen something similar only once years ago in a private collection. This was no machine doubling. It was hub doubling and an obverse misalignment to boot. The suggestion was clear: send it to a grading service immediately. Weeks passed as Daniel waited for the envelope to return. When it finally did, he tore it open, his heart hammering as he read the label inside. 1978 Washington quarter double die obverse with off-center strike, 58 Australian dollars. He could hardly breathe, staring at the slab in his hands, knowing he'd stumbled onto something almost no one else had documented. Word of his find spread through collector circles like a spark. Articles began appearing in numismatic newsletters detailing the characteristics of this rare 1978 error. Dealers updated their price lists and began offering finder's fees for similar examples. A handful more surfaced over time, most heavily worn from years of circulation, but each one confirming the variety's legitimacy and rarity. Daniel's coin became the benchmark example, pictured in guides and shared at shows where curious crowds gathered to see it in person. At first, the value was modest but steady. As collectors began to appreciate the significance and the extreme scarcity, the price climbed. In private sales and public auctions, bidders pushed the value higher than anyone had predicted. Over the years, examples in higher grades broke records and set new benchmarks as demand for rare clad errors surged. Daniel kept his coin for many years, watching its story grow. He displayed it at local coin shows and gave talks about modern varieties, inspiring a new generation of collectors to search their change more carefully. Finally, when the time was right, he consigned it to a major auction where it was showcased prominently in the catalog with a 2-page spread telling his story. The bidding that evening was electric as collectors and dealers competed fiercely. The hammer fell at a price Daniel could scarcely believe. In that moment, his quiet rainy morning discovery was transformed into a numismatic legend, bringing between $45,500 and $118,500 depending on grade and bidder passion. Daniel simply smiled quietly as the audience applauded, knowing he'd uncovered a treasure hidden in plain sight. In 1993, the Washington Quarter was already a familiar sight in every corner of America, worn smooth in pockets, change drawers, and cash registers alike. The year itself marked an era of transition as the country edged into the digital age, yet still held tightly to the tangible symbols of its past. The quarter retained its classic design, George Washington's steadfast profile on the obverse and the proud eagle on the reverse. At the Philadelphia and Denver Mint's production lines hummed with relentless energy, striking millions of coins to meet the demands of commerce. But as history often shows, perfection is elusive, and even the most carefully monitored process is not immune to a momentary lapse. That year, somewhere deep inside the Philadelphia Mint, a single die was prepared with an imperfection so subtle it slipped past inspectors unnoticed. During the hubbing stage, when the working die received its impression from the master, a slight misalignment occurred, creating faint doubling on the obverse lettering and numbers. Compounding this was a faint but distinctive overpolishing that left certain areas of the eagle's wings on the reverse weak and almost ghost-like. To the naked eye, the quarter seemed ordinary, but under scrutiny it revealed something extraordinary. For years this variety went undetected, blending into the endless stream of circulation. Countless hands exchanged it, countless cashiers counted it, yet no one stopped to look closer. It was only in the mid-2000s that the coin's secret began to emerge, thanks to the keen eye of a hobbyist named Erin, who prided herself on searching rolls of coins in her spare time. On a quiet evening, she sat at her kitchen table with nothing but a pile of quarter rolls, a magnifying loupe, and her boundless curiosity. As she worked through roll after roll, she grew weary of seeing the same designs, the same dates, the same dull gray patina of worn copper nickel. But then one coin caught her attention, not because of its luster, but because something about the date seemed slightly off. She paused, turning the 1993 quarter under the light and squinting through her loupe. The 9 and 3 appeared thicker than normal, with a faint shadow of doubling around them. She flipped it over and studied the eagle, noticing the peculiar fading in the feathers. A chill of excitement ran through her. She set it aside and kept searching, but her mind kept returning to that one odd piece. Later, she posted photos online asking if anyone had seen anything like it. At first, the responses were mixed. Some thought it was just machine doubling, others dismissed the feather weakness as wear. But then a seasoned era coin collector weighed in, noting the crispness of the doubling and the unusual pattern of the reverse weakness. He suggested what Erin dared not yet believe. This was a legitimate double die obverse paired with a weakened reverse die, likely due to overpolishing. The suggestion was clear: send it for authentication. Erin's heart raced as she packaged it up and mailed it to a grading service. Weeks passed until the day she received the envelope back. Hands trembling, she read the slab label, confirming what she'd hoped for. 1993 Washington Quarter, double die obverse with reverse weak strike, MS64. The news spread quickly among collectors and dealers. This was no ordinary coin, but a rare mint error that few had ever documented. As more enthusiasts began to search their rolls, a handful of additional examples surfaced, though none in quite as high a grade as Erin's. Each new discovery only fueled the excitement and the sense of mystery surrounding the variety. Over time, the value of these rare 1993 quarters began to rise. At first, the prices were modest, just a few $100s more than face value. But as the rarity became clear and demand grew, the numbers climbed steadily. Dealers began listing them in auctions, collectors began competing for the finest known examples, and prices soared far beyond what anyone had initially imagined. Erin kept her coin for many years, cherishing it as the centerpiece of her collection. She displayed it at local shows and shared her story with others who were just beginning their own journeys into numismatics. But when the time finally came, she decided to consign it to a major auction. The buzz around the sale was palpable, and the bidding that evening was nothing short of intense. As the auctioneer called out the final bids, the crowd held its breath, watching the numbers climb higher and higher. When the hammer finally fell, Erin's 1993 Washington Quarter had sold for a sum that left her nearly speechless. Between $38,500 and $106,500, depending on condition and grade, these elusive errors had secured their place among the most coveted modern rarities. Erin smiled quietly to herself, knowing she'd uncovered something extraordinary in the most ordinary of places.